chances are more limited. So today we're going to talk about how to form a business in California, obtaining an employee identification number and a social security number, as well as an individual taxpayer identification number, and how to register a foreign business entity in California. And then we'll talk about some financing sources, and then we'll leave room at the end for Q&A if you have any questions. So again, today we're just going to talk about generally some business considerations for non-US citizens. We will not be discussing any specific issue. If you do have questions, you can reach out to Nicole Lubinas if you want to schedule a time to talk about issues that may be specific to your business. So first, we'll talk about forming a business in California. So what steps are necessary to form a business as a non-US citizen in California? So if you want to use the raise hand function at the bottom of your screen, we just wanted to see if any folks have started a business before. Not seeing any hands. That's great. We're excited that you're here and hope that this presentation is helpful. So the first step to starting a business is you will want to create a business plan. A business plan outlines the key aspects of your business. And we've outlined some considerations that you might think about, such as a company description, your market, who you want to sell your product or service to, organization and management, how you want to organize your business and how you plan on managing employees, if you plan on having employees, how you will kind of source your products, so service or product line, and then how you will market your business and sell your product or service. And then, of course, financing. So that includes getting investors potentially, and then kind of thinking long-term and making projections for your financial future. And we only mean this to be a framework. You can start a business without having thought through all of these things, but we just wanted to kind of put out there things that you might be considering when forming a business. Secondly, you'll want to choose a business name. So there are some rules in California. Your name must use the English alphabet, Arabic numerals, or certain symbols. And you can find naming restrictions within Section 21002B of the California Code of Regulations. And by the way, this presentation will be shared after, so you'll have access to all of the things that we're talking about here. Remember all these specific regulations. And you want to make sure that your business name is distinguishable from existing business names, for legal reasons, but also just so your customers can easily find you, they can Google you, and they can have access to your products or services. There's a legal rule that your name must not be deceptively similar to an existing business's name. And this can help prevent trademark or any licensing disputes. When choosing a business name, brand name, or other trademarks, you can use the US government has a patent website to see if the name you're considering is already registered as a trademark. If it is named, again, to avoid a trademark dispute or other legal battle. You can also check availability of website domains and social media accounts. Again, this will help your customers easily find you if you have a recognizable name. And if the name that you're considering is already taken, you should probably consider another name or trademark, and consider registering your domain name and creating social media accounts early. This will allow you to prevent others from taking the name that you would like to use, and again, ensure that customers can easily find your business. And then finally, you'll want to check the availability of your name under California law. And again, there's a tool online. BizFile Online is a really useful resource that has a lot of the resources that we'll talk about today. And you can search the names of different businesses so that, again, you can see if that name is available.
Julia, I just had a quick question. This is Nicole. Are you able to share it in full screen view, or
Oh, sorry
presented
about
with you, I
that.
believe.
Let's see. Is that better?
Yes, much better. Thank you.
Okay, I'm so sorry about that. Thank you, Nicole. Okay, perfect. And then another thing is you will want to choose a business entity type. So there are a variety of different entities. You're probably familiar with a corporation, potentially. We interact with corporations all the time, whether that's Google or Amazon. Um, you know, we interact with them all the time. There's also small sole proprietorships. So that would be just you running a business, um, and you would pay personal income tax on the profits earned. There are also partnerships. So that's when yourself and another person, or many other people form a business with the intent to share profits and losses. There are also limited partnerships, where certain people, general partners, control the business, and then limited partners have more limited scope, liability and also responsibility, but they share in the profits and losses. There's also a limited liability company, which is a corporate structure that protects owners from personal liability, with pass-through taxation. And there's again a C corporation, which is a lot of the larger entities that we interact with on a daily basis. One thing to note is that non-US citizens cannot own or be shareholders in S corporations. That's a different form of corporation. I'm just gonna share another resource that we just wanted to talk through. Can you see this screen all right?
If you can zoom in, yes.
Yep. Okay. Ooh, probably too big. Okay. So I just wanted to talk through some of the entities mentioned that may be pertinent for smaller business owners, um, particularly a limited liability company, an LLC or an LLC. An LLC provides strong personal liability protection, which means that if your business were to get sued, you would have limited liability for your own personal assets. And LLCs also offer flexibility in terms of structure. There's also single taxation. So, unlike a corporation, you would not pay corporate income tax and would only be taxed on the LLC's income. And LLCs do not have their own federal tax regime and can be treated as C corps, partnerships, or disregarded entities. And there are some state income tax considerations. There's an annual $800 tax, um, and LLC fee, unless the LLC affirmatively elects to be treated as a different type of entity for both federal and state taxes. So again, this resource will be shared. So if this seems complicated, you can take some time to digest this and then potentially reach out to the clinic if you wanted to discuss issues specific to your business. Ownership of LLCs is flexible. It's based on an operating agreement, meaning that the people who participate in the business can have a variety of different voting and economic rights, and also can have a flexible governance structure. So, how the business is run, the LLCs offer flexibility for that as well. And so, just some advantages of LLCs again, single federal taxation, unless you elect to be treated as a C corporation. There's organizational and managerial flexibility, like we talked about, and then multiple classes of economic rights are permitted, and entities and foreign owners are allowed. The disadvantages for LLCs, there are some exit option issues. So investors may request that if you would like to exit or no longer partake in the LLC structure, that you change to a C corporation, which I'll talk about next. And then transferring membership interests can be a little tricky and depend on the operating agreement. So the agreement that you form to run your business, that kind of governs how you run the business. And so that would likely dictate how transferring of membership interests would occur. And then again, those operating agreements can be complex and may take time to draft. Okay, so then we'll talk about a C corporation. So C corporations provide strong personal liability, are subject to double taxation, as mentioned, and may have an unlimited number of shareholders and an unlimited number of classes of shares. What this means is shareholders are investors in your business. Typically, they purchase equity, and that helps you raise capital as the owner of a corporation. And then you can give certain classes of people, based on the type of share they have, different voting rights or other participation rights. Again, corporations offer strong personal liability protection. So basically, your only liability if you have a corporation would be the amount of money that you invest to start the corporation. You would not be liable from your personal assets. There's also, the federal income tax consideration that we talked about, double taxation, which means that a corporate income tax is imposed on the corporation at the regular corporate tax rate, and the shareholder is also taxed on applicable income rates on certain distributions. And there's also double taxation on the state income tax side. There's franchise tax on corporate income, and the shareholder is also taxed at applicable income rates on certain distributions from the corporation. Ownership of corporations can be flexible. This is based on the bylaws, which are, again, the kind of governing document that dictates how the company can be run. And for governance, there's usually a board of directors and then officers. So officers would be, CEO or the chief technology officer or chief financial officer. The board of directors kind of help manage the executive team. And then there are also shareholders who are the investors who have invested money in the company, and they have different voting rights as well. So as you can probably assess, corporations are a little bit more complicated to run than LLCs. And so the administrative requirements can be onerous and burdensome, especially for small business owners. But there are advantages, like we talked about, multiple classes of economic rights. You can provide incentive stock options to your executive team to, kind of incentivize them to want to perform well, because then they get rewarded with, these incentive stock options in the company. You can easily transfer shares of stock, and again, entities and foreign owners are allowed. The largest disadvantages that we wanted to flag are, again, the double taxation and the high administrative burden. And then I'll just run through one more type of company. So this is the sole proprietorship. Oops, sorry about that. These sole proprietorships are often great for smaller businesses. However, they offer no personal liability protection. So while it's the simplest structure to operate, the proprietorship's income is treated as the owner's income for tax purposes. And then you would have unlimited liability for obligations of the business, which means that if you were sued or if you go bankrupt, you would face personal liability, not just business liability, like with an LLC or a corporation. There's single taxation, so there's no corporate income tax. The federal income tax is single and state income tax is single, so that is an advantage. The single owner must be, again, one person. There are no kind of corporate formalities, so all of the administrative burdens that we talked about with the corporation wouldn't apply here. So they're easier to run, but the trade-off is that you take on that additional liability on a personal level if something were to go awry in your business. And this can make it difficult to attract customers or suppliers or employees who are used to working with more sophisticated entities like a corporation or LLC. And it can be difficult to get business credit or a business. But again, sometimes sole proprietorships are helpful just because they're easier to run and form. And now I'm going to pass it back to my colleague Ramin, who will talk about some of the other considerations to forming an entity. And just again, let me know if you can see the screen.
Thank
So yeah,
you.
pass it on to Ramin.
I think we go to the next slide. Thank you. So once you've done the steps that Julia just described, the next thing you'll want to do is select a registered agent. And this can be an officer or director of the business. The only requirement is that it's an individual that's aged 18 years or older, and in California, they have to be a California resident. And it's mandatory for all the business types that Julia just mentioned, except for sole proprietorships, which was the last one she discussed. The one thing to know about this is that this is essentially how the state knows who to contact in regards to your business, as well as if an individual wants to sue your business, who they can serve process to. Another consideration along these same lines is that if you're not planning on locating a physical location for your business, you may want to rent a virtual office, which will essentially give you a street address and mail forwarding address where folks can send you physical mail and it'll get forwarded to your personal address. The one thing to also note there is that these addresses will be public. And so both the registered agent's address and the business address will be public. And if you don't want those to be seen by others, if they're your personal addresses, you might want to list something else, or have another person be the registered agent. So once you've done all of that, then it's time to register your company with the California Secretary of State. And you can do that by following the link that's on the page. Kind of what we just discussed, everything that you mentioned in that registration will become part of the public record. And so particularly non-US citizens should be aware and feel comfortable with the information that they're providing being publicly accessible. And once you've registered your company, the next step is to obtain an EIN. And the EIN is essentially an identification number that is used in connection with your business's taxes. And in order to obtain this, you need to already have a valid taxpayer identification number, social security number, or ITIN, or another EIN from a different business. And we're going to discuss that in greater detail in the next couple slides. Another step that you have to undertake as registering your business is registering your beneficial owners. And beneficial owners are essentially the folks that control the company, whether that's directly or indirectly. And the main reason behind this regulation is that so the government and different government agencies understand who is actually controlling the business, and they can monitor certain things such as national security, law enforcement, et cetera. The process for registering a beneficial owner is on Section C. You complete the filing at that link there. The one thing to note is that you will not get a record of you having submitted this filing, so it's very important to remember to take a screenshot of your filing being submitted as soon as it goes through, because otherwise you won't be able to go back and get that. And some of the information that you'll have to provide when making that filing is included there, including the information of the beneficial owner themselves, such as the residential address, their ID numbers, a picture of their ID, and also some of the company's information, such as its name, principal business address, jurisdiction of formation, and EIN. The one thing to note is that once you make this filing, you're still responsible for updating it on an ongoing basis. And so you want to make sure to report any changes to that information that you previously provided within 30 days of the change occurring. So if you change the business address, or if the beneficial owner changes after you sell the company or parts of the company, you want to make sure to update the government on those updates. Next, you'll want to make sure that your business has all of the required permits and licenses. There's no separate requirement for getting permits for non-US residents, but the requirements for which permits and licenses you need depends on what kind of business you're planning on opening. So if you're planning on opening a barbershop, you'll need certain licenses. And if you're planning on opening a funeral home, you need certain licenses. The easiest way to see what those licenses are is to go to that CalGold link that's shown at the bottom, type in the type of business that you're looking to open, and it'll detail the different types of licenses, permits, and other approvals you'll need in order to undertake certain operations. So as we discussed previously, one of the things you want to do is apply for an EIN through the federal government, and that's your tax ID for your business. And it's free to apply. And you pretty much need it to undertake any of the activities that are listed on the screen, which are usually things that you'll want to do as a business owner. So if you have employees and you want to pay them, you'll need an EIN. Or if you want to engage in businesses that relate to alcohol, tobacco, and firearms, you need an EIN. And so these are the things to note of if you fall into any of these categories, you'll want to make sure that you apply for an EIN. And the steps are on the slide that was discussed a couple slides ago. There's a few different ways of applying. The easiest and fastest way is online, as with most things. But you can also apply by fax, by mail, or if you're internationally based at the time, you can apply by phone. The last topic I'll discuss before turning it over to my colleague Ali is how to obtain a social security number. A social security number is an identification number that's issued by the Social Security Administration to citizens and authorized non-citizens. And it's usually used to indicate that you're approved to work in the United States. And so in order to receive a social security number, you'll want to complete the form SS5, which is the application, and you'll need to submit evidence of your identity, your age, and either your permanent residence status or your US citizenship. And with that, I'll turn it over to my colleague Ali to discuss the individual taxpayer identification number process.
Thank you. So in the event that you are not able to obtain a social security number, instead you can get an individual taxpayer identification number or ITIN. You can receive this through applying to the IRS, and it is issued to non-residents who are ineligible to receive a social security number. It's important to remember that your ITIN is not a work authorization. However, it can be used for filing taxes while residing in the United States. So you will use your ITIN in place of a social security number. In order to receive your ITIN, the certain steps you have to complete include completing a form W-7. You can download this from the IRS's website as well as the instructions that go along with it. As a part of the application, it'll ask you to provide certain documents to verify your status and your identity. This will include things such as a passport, a visa, a driver's license, your national identification number, or birth certificate. And to submit your Form W-7 along with your required documents, you can either mail it in physically, you can present it to an IRS office, or through something called an acceptance agent, who's someone who's authorized by the IRS to accept your form, and you can find those acceptance agents on the IRS's website. Now we're going to talk through the process for registering your foreign business entity in California. So this applies to businesses that were formed outside of California and perform business in California. So if you form a business in another state or country and you want to conduct business in the state of California, first you must register and qualify with the California Secretary of State, and we've included the link of where to file and register. The California Secretary of State's office cannot provide you advice on whether or not a business must qualify or register to do business in California. So if that's a question you have, that's something that I would recommend reaching out to the clinic with assistance with. And this applies to businesses that are transacting in interstate business, which means entering into repeated and successive transactions of its business in the California state, other than interstate or foreign commerce. So for the process of registering your foreign business entity in California, you can file online at the link that we provided. In terms of corporations, LLCs, and limited partnerships, they're required to provide a valid certificate of good standing. You can typically get this certificate from the Secretary of State of the state where your business is registered, or from your equivalent agency office in your home state or country. And the requirements will vary by state, but generally this will involve registering your business, checking your compliance. So this is things such as checking to make sure you're in compliance with all business filings, licenses, and tax filings are up to date. Usually there's a fee involved, and that varies by state. And then once you complete those steps, you'll either be able to download or be mailed a physical copy of your certificate of good standing. So another option you might look at while you're forming your business is how to secure financing for your business. So there's a couple of different ways you can do this. One way is to fundraise. You can do this through collecting funds from family members, or you can apply for a small business administrative loan. The SBA is a federal agency that helps out small businesses. And in order to qualify for an SBA loan, your business must be at least 51% owned by a US citizen or a green card holder. Another step to securing fundraising is having a bank account. So non-residents are able to open bank accounts in the United States. There might be additional paperwork required. Some US banks require a social security number, but non-residents can use an ITIN instead. And banks will vary between each other on what they require in terms of documentation. But commonly requested documents are your proof of address. And acceptable documents for that will include things such as a pay stub or a paycheck, a letter with your name and address, or a utility bill, as well as identification. And again, this could be a driver's license, a passport, student ID, an authorization card, or a national card. And then finally, typically banks will ask for you to provide an initial deposit into the bank account that you open as well. And then some alternatives for banking, if you're a non-resident who cannot qualify for a US banking account, would be international banking or a correspondent account. This is an existing partnership between your home country's bank and a US bank. And our last two slides show some helpful resources for alternative sources of funding. These are both Bay Area and across the country. So there's the City of San Jose Small Business Resource website. It includes information about how to get various types of small business funding. There's the Silicon Valley SBDC. They have great general business advice, including more advice on how to get a small business loan. There's the SBA that we mentioned, which is the federal agency that gives out loans that are secured by third parties, and it also has great information on small business loans. There's Pacific Community Ventures. This is a mission-driven lender, and they provide loans that range from $10,000 to $200,000 to California small businesses, and it also provides other types of business advising. There's also this great organization called Working Solutions, which is a nonprofit in the Bay Area, and it provides microloans of up to $50,000. They also provide free business advice for their loan recipients. Opportunity Fund invests in small business owners who don't have access to traditional financial resources, and they also have a San Jose office. And then lastly, Kiva is a nonprofit that connects lenders with borrowers, both in the US and internationally. And that is the end of our presentation. So we wanted to open the floor to any questions that any attendees may have on our presentation. Hopefully, maybe our presentation was so good we answered every question out there. Well, if there aren't any questions, it's been wonderful speaking to you all. And if you have any questions that come up later, we would direct you to reach out to Nicole in the clinic to help answer those questions. And as Julia mentioned earlier, we'll make sure to distribute the presentation so you'll be able to access all those helpful links that we provided, as well as that business matrix that Julia showed that helps you compare and consider in terms of making your different business entity selection. Oh, and it looks like we have some questions now. So one of the questions we received is, can you help calm down fears in terms of potential risks in trying to find legal status when having an ITIN? So if we could clarify, I think maybe this person has received an ITIN and they're also trying to receive documentation. in the US. And unfortunately, that is something that's immigration related, and that's something that our team is not familiar with. So we will need to direct you back to the clinic in order to answer that question. And yes, the slides from today's Zoom will be available to everyone.
Allie, there was also one question in the Q&A. Would the process to start a business be the same for starting a nonprofit organization?
Good question. So a nonprofit organization is a separate business. It has a different tax structure and liability, and is a whole other entity. And so that would be separate from the process that we spoke about today. Some of the processes would be similar in terms of obtaining your EIN or your social security number, opening up bank accounts and the such, but I would recommend that you reach out to the clinic for nonprofit specific considerations, as that's something that we did not cover in our presentation.
Thanks so much. And thank you to those who are asking questions. Feel free to unmute to ask a question, or also use the chat or the Q&A box to ask any questions.
We have one question if you. Can you hear me okay?
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay. Give me 1 second. What's happening here? ¿Qué se le pregunta?
No, si para un negocio se necesita una licencia para emprender ese negocio, ¿cómo se sacaría, por ejemplo, si fuera de construcción?
For a business that needs like do you need like a license to start a business? And if you do, like how would you acquire the license? Like for example, for like a construction business. And then we also have another Q&A another question in the Q&A.
Sure. I mean, do you want to talk through the business licensing as you covered that in your portion?
Sure. So there's no general license needed to start a business off the bat. But to your question about what specific license would be needed, we wouldn't be in a situation where we could give you that off the top of our heads. But that website that we showed, the CalGold, that would be the best place to go. Type in the business type that you're looking to start, and it'll give you the run through of all the different types of permits and licenses that are required for the different operations of that type of business.
Thank you. And can you send that website through the chat again?
Sure, no problem.
And there is another Q&A in the chat.
Yes, this question is asked, so am I understanding correctly that in order to set up the simplest form of partnership, it would be a co-op with 51% of the ownership being a US citizen? So a co-op is a form of partnership. To form any kind of partnership, you need at least 2 owners. And there's a limited partnership, a limited liability partnership, limited liability company. Those are all forms of partnerships that can be simple to set up. But they, as Julia touched on earlier, they do all have their different considerations in terms of ongoing administrative fees and processes to keep them in good standing with the state. And so I think it's really a individual determination over what is the simplest form of partnership that would work well for you and your business. And so if that's something that you would like to have an in-depth conversation about, then we recommend you reach out to the clinic in order to have that conversation. And as we mentioned earlier, that chart that we showed earlier will be shared with everyone. So you'll be able to look at the different factors side by side, and hopefully that also will help you analyze and look at the details of your circumstances to determine which one you think would work well for you.
I'm not seeing any more questions. Thank you so much for all your presentation.
Of course, thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks everyone.
Thank you all.